than half are over age 25, and about 80% are at least 20. The majority work in food service. About a third are parents and face increasing barriers to upward mobility for their families, like a lack of affordable childcare or predictable shift scheduling. On a percentage basis, 2 million is only 1% of the overall workforce, so critics of minimum wage increases suggest the laws are therefore unimportant. They underestimate the impact because they fail to look the slightest bit up the income distribution, where we uncover a much larger problem. Almost half the nation's workforce at the time of the protests were paid below the $15 threshold. Starbucks was a smart place to protest. The company was then and remains now well ahead of the retail and food service industry in caring for its people, as its mission statement to inspire and nurture the human spirit suggests. Starbucks had, a few months prior, added to its long-standing health insurance and stock programs for all employees by launching a new university degree program in partnership with Arizona State University. The company received fawning news coverage for the innovative program, including a cover story in The Atlantic that showed a barista holding a diploma and the headline, "Can Starbucks Save the Middle Class?" Though the protesters didn't know it at the time, the company had already started planning some of its biggest employee investments yet. I was part of the Starbucks corporate team working on this project. My job was to set the pay rates for every Starbucks store employee, including its 100,000-plus baristas in the United States, who on average were about my age. The plan was to improve the pay, benefits, and working conditions for store partners, as all employees at the company are called. Significant starting pay increases, free food while on shift, greater visibility into scheduling, enhanced career development opportunities, and a long-awaited relaxation of the dress code would all be rolled out together in a grand celebration called Partner Experience Investments. Our team felt great about the initiative, but $15 per hour was not on our menu, and in most cities, we would be far from that ideal. At the time, the Fight for $15 movement was considered fringe, if known about at all, as the protests had not yet broken through to the nationwide public consciousness. There was no precedent for that much of a wage increase, and we couldn't point to any other company of similar size paying anywhere close as a comparison. In my more optimistic moments, I might have thought that for all our efforts and Starbucks' history of incremental corporate benevolence, we would usher in a new era of economic fairness and goodwill, just like The Atlantic had predicted. Over time, the company's efforts would bend back the arc of inequality, setting off a chain of corporate awakening with cascading wage and benefit increases across the economy that would take society back to the days when a middle-income earner could own a house, support a family, see a doctor without risking bankruptcy, and send children off to college on the steady path to an equally stable livelihood. We would make America great again before anyone thought to print the idea on a red hat. In my more grounded moments, I at least knew Starbucks would stand out even further from the competition in the coming year. What I soon learned was that while increased pay would make a difference in many places around the country where the economic pressures of affordable housing, childcare, and transportation were not extreme, in most urban centers, our initiatives had no chance of resonating with the daily lives of baristas, including those I walked past working in the store attached to the headquarters, steps away from the protest outside. I hadn't seen the crowd until I left work that day. Weaving through the signs, I walked toward my car parked on a battered street several blocks from campus, figuratively and literally on the other side of the railroad tracks. At the time, the corporate parking garage had a 4-year waiting list, so far-away street parking let me experience a small slice of the city's worsening real estate burden, caused in part by Amazon, which took up an increasing share of square footage in unmarked buildings all over town, and untethered housing prices from incomes along with it. This was years before Jeff Bezos would erect a not-so-subtle phallic-shaped building in the middle of downtown to symbolize his public dominance over the city. On the busiest days, when the Seattle Mariners had an afternoon baseball game next door and street parking filled up early, I parked on the side of the street with the car campers, people whose only option of housing was their vehicle. 80 years prior, the same land was a Hooverville, named mockingly after